Hey, Zhao Yang. Well, it might be early in the morning for you over there in Beijing, but for us it's still late at night in New York, and we're wrapping up after this emergency session here now, which really I think I would characterize as a clash of words anyway, between Moscow and Washington, between Russia and the United States. At one point the US needed 9 votes for the meeting to be completely open. I don't think they got them, so they went behind closed doors, the opposition being led by Russia. Russia, like other countries, annoyed that the meeting was taking place at all, saying it was interference in internal and domestic affairs in Iran, and saying that the meeting is an abuse of the UN Security Council. So they had closed consultations, which really are in secret. We don't know what was said in the course of that meeting, but then they had open statements, and afterwards the president of the council for the month of January, the ambassador from Kazakhstan, came out and said that his conclusion was that after everybody had spoken, everybody's looking for a peaceful end to these protests in Iran and a return to an open civil society there. So no resolution, no statement, which is reasonably unusual, but he did say as he walked away that if other countries wish to bring this issue back to the table again, if they wish to pursue it further, then they'll take it up, he said. Jiaoyang?
Well, John, which countries would you say were most vocal at this meeting and had the biggest impact?
Well, there was a definite split, actually, between the North Americans and the Europeans. Remember, they're all lumped in together in this deal with Iran to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions. France, for example, stressed the importance of that 6-nation deal. It's 5 nations of the Security Council, plus Germany and Iran. But this deal, of course, is massively derided by the current administration in Washington, D.C., the Trump administration. We heard from Ethiopia and Equatorial Guinea, too, who questioned whether this meeting, the fact it was taking place at all, would damage the unity of the Security Council. China took a very similar line, saying that the meeting was against the Charter of the United Nations. And then Nikki Haley, who is the US ambassador to the United Nations, putting Iran on notice over these protests and saying the world is watching how you do. Take a listen.
The Iranian people will determine their own destiny. And let there be no doubt whatsoever, the United States stands unapologetically with those in Iran who seek freedom for themselves, prosperity for their families, and dignity for their nation. We will not be quiet.
Well, that was US Ambassador Nikki Haley. Now, the Iranians were invited to speak at the meeting, and in the course of the statement, they said that the US has a long history of intervention in their country, of which the latest example is this meeting that took place today. Jiaoyang?
Well, John, an inconclusive result it seems so far. But what did the U.S. hope to achieve by calling this meeting in the first place?
Well, I think, to be fair, since these protests broke out in Iran, the U.S. really hasn't missed a trick. It has not missed a day when it has highlighted the fact that these protests are taking place at all. And this is completely different to how the last round of protests back in 2009 were handled by President Obama, who essentially ignored them. Now, what President Trump and his administration have done is that through his tweets and through other vehicles, they've kept up the pressure, pointing out what is going on, all the time encouraging the protesters, but not actually tainting them or making it seem as if they are surrogates of the United States. Now, Iran, for its part, blames the CIA and Israel and Saudi Arabia for fanning the flames of these protests that we have seen. And I think that that's probably very likely. I think that's probably been going on for quite a while behind the scenes in various ways. Now, what happens next? Well, we don't know whether anybody's going to bring this issue up again, so we don't know whether it's going to come back to the Security Council like it did today, Friday. But the next date to look out for is when President Trump must decide whether to put back on sanctions that were rolled back under the Obama administration when they signed that nuclear deal to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions. And the deadline for him to do that is midway through this month. Jiaoyang?
John, thank you very much. Our correspondent John Terrett in New York.